A few weeks ago, when the coronavirus really started to hit hard, the Prime Minister said, didn't he, that we're all Melburnians now. On his part, it was an attempt, I guess, to show solidarity with Victorians doing it tough. I think it was genuine, but to be frank, I don't think anyone who's not living in Melbourne tonight can really appreciate how bad things are. Let this just sink in for a moment. The 5 million people living in Melbourne are legally locked up in their homes from 8 p.m. until 5 a.m. unless they're amongst the very small numbers who are going out to work or seeking medical care. The government and police are now operating under special state of disaster laws, not even the usual state of emergency rules. These have even gone up a notch. When, other than in cities under martial law or enemy occupation, do you have a general curfew? Well, we do now in Melbourne. There's no schools, there's no childcare, no weddings, no shopping, except for one person per household per day and only for food. And if you want to leave home for exercise or the groceries, it can only be for 1 hour a day and only within 5 kilometres of your home. There's hardly any work either because only essential services are allowed to operate normally. Food, that's healthcare and utilities. Abattoirs, for instance, can only operate at 2/3 their normal capacity, and all staff will now need to wear hospital-style PPE. Most building sites will only have 25% of their normal staff. All of this to stop the seemingly inexorable spread of the coronavirus, which, as of today, afflicts nearly 7,000 Victorians, over 400 in hospital tonight, and 35 of them in intensive care. All along, Victorians have accepted that drastic measures might be needed to protect us from this virus, which we know puts vulnerable people at serious risk. We get that. And from the start back in March, Victoria had the toughest and longest initial shutdowns, but clearly none of that worked. Or it might have, if the government didn't stuff it up by getting bouncers to run quarantine, let this virus out into the community, and then act far too slowly to shut it down, knocking back military support, testing too slowly, and tracing too poorly. If we are all to live under something that's approaching house arrest for the next 6 weeks or more, then Victorians must have more transparency from their government. To date, very little disease modelling has been publicly released, and there's too much of a trust me basis from the Premier. Well, I don't trust you anymore, Daniel Andrews. I don't trust you. I don't trust your ministers. And I'm fast not trusting your experts either, given they're the same experts that have been advising you all the way along. And look where we are tonight. Why is it, I want to know, that tests in Victoria take up to 9 days to come back, but in New South Wales, you get your result in 24 hours? Why is it that contact tracing so rapidly happens in New South Wales, but in Victoria, more and more of the infections, in terms of the source, remain unknown? Why have nursing homes in other states kept their residents safe, yet here you've got over 1,000 families facing the risk that their loved ones won't survive the week? No one pretends that managing this virus is ever going to be easy. Balancing lives and livelihoods in the grip of a pandemic that almost no one had foreseen or planned for. I get that. I've worked in government and I've worked on some big challenges like illegal boat arrivals and terrorism. But as well as a bit of contrition for getting so much wrong, there's got to be a lot more candour and taking the people into your confidence, because we haven't seen that at all to date from you or your government. What's the plan, Dan? What does success look like? Is it now the total elimination of the disease, or just getting daily numbers down below, say, 100? Because you've never told us. And if you're not in Victoria, don't think you're unscathed here, because the Victorian Premier has been very adept at pushing much of the financial cost of his stuff-ups onto the federal government. Indeed, just before 5 o'clock tonight, we had another multi-billion-dollar announcement from the Prime Minister. So unfortunately, every Australian taxpayer will end up footing the bill for Victoria's incompetence, let alone suffer the consequences, all of us, of a national recession. In the Age newspaper today, 4 leading epidemiologists called on the Victorian government to be more transparent. One of them, Professor Tony Blakely, said, and I quote, "We as a citizenry need better data. We don't just want to be berated about behaving badly. We need to know why the cases are increasing and how we can fix it." Everyone, he said, needs to feel like they're in the control room. I couldn't agree more. From where I sit, this looks more and more like a political leader wanting to be seen to be doing something, as everything else he's tried has only seen the numbers increase. It's a political solution. I'm not so sure it's a health one, and I very much doubt it's sustainable. At the very least, it's not sustainable economically.